Simply put, water is life. And in our traditional ways, we're taught respect. You have to put your life in a place where your actions demonstrate that respect.
Water is sacred to us. It's life. I mean, without healthy drinking water, we wouldn't be here.
This is sacred and we need to be careful with it. We got to protect it because when it's gone, there's no second choices there. I mean, you can't live off of Coca-Cola. You know, seriously, this is it.
I feel like in Michigan, we really take water for granted.
Michigan is in all of the Great Lakes. Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all of them have the additional burden of being a steward to the largest freshwater body resource in the world.
People need to understand that every possible place you could visit in the Great Lakes region, anytime you see or experience water, you are in the presence of Anishinaabe stories and Anishinaabe history.
Well, where we are here today is the Straits of Mackinac. Mackinac actually comes from Michilimackinac, which means the place of the great turtle. It's a place of spirituality because it's also where our creation story begins. As Anishinaabe people of the Great Lakes, our creation story takes place here in the Straits of Mackinac, and it begins with water. The Straits of Mackinac are known as the heart of Turtle Island for the rest of North America, which means that they are there in order to provide that life source and that energy as water to the rest of North America.
The lakes have helped guide how and where we lived and where our cultural centers are.
The lakes and fishing have been part of our Lifeways for many, many years.
The term Lifeways is more about a sense of being, about all of your cultural teachings being wrapped up who you are as a person.
So the Great Lakes are my lifeline. I sustainably harvest medicines, and there's a lot of at-risk medicines in the area.
And so any threat to the habitats in the Great Lakes is not just a threat to the well-being of a particular fish or particular plant, particular animal, but to all of the cultural traditions, the family life, the economic ways of life that go along with being able to relate to that species.
It's told to us that during a time of famine, the Whitefish clan walked into the water and turned into the whitefish that we know today in order to provide and feed the Anishinaabe during that time of famine. And we know that as long as Lake Whitefish continues to exist, that we will never starve.
So our people not only were dependent on water for water itself and fish, fishing and fish as a food supply, but manuman. Manuman is the Bodwe-Watamie word for wild rice. And of course, manuman was dependent on safe, clean drinking water.
So for Bay Mills Indian community, as well as 4 other tribes, they are signatories to the 1836 Treaty of Washington. And in that treaty, our ancestors negotiated and preserved the right to fish, hunt, and gather within the ceded territory. It is still a very much integral part of our life. And so when you have the Line 5 dual pipeline that is running through our treaty ceded territory and is threatening that treaty right, what it actually means is that it's threatening the Anishinaabe way of life as well as the Anishinaabe existence here in the state of Michigan.
First of all, most fossil fuel infrastructure was never built with the consent of Indigenous people or other communities that were living there.
About the same time the bridge went in, pipeline went in, everybody was probably thinking, oh, that's part of the bridge.
And I didn't know it was there. I was appalled. And then when I found out how old and decrepit it was and how unneeded and everything else, it's just like, this is criminal. We have to do something about this.
Well, the pipeline's corroded. It could burst at any time. It wasn't built to last this long, and it's in a horrible area with strong currents, so it's just very vulnerable.
So that pipeline, if it was to break, It would devastate this area.
I know that if there was an oil spill that happened in the Straits of Mackinac, there would be nothing we could do to stop it. And so when we're talking about December or January and there's 3 feet of ice covering the straits, there's nothing we can do to break through that in order to stop an oil spill. And what's going to happen is it'll bloom beneath the ice and spread even further as the current pulls it underneath. And so without a proper safety plan in place, without even being able to answer the question of what you would do when there's ice coverage, it's just further evidence of why we can't trust Enbridge and why we can't trust their safety record either.
It's not safe to be extracting it in the first place. Moving it anywhere is not safe. You know, Line 5 is particularly egregious example of infrastructure that's handling fossil fuels because it's going under the Straits of Mackinac. That's a big problem, but there's also well over 100 other water crossings that are close to the lakes.
But it's terrible because we're putting so much at risk for a profit for a Canadian corporation. And it's so bad that they don't want the tunnel they don't want it to go through their lands. Canada's pushing for it to come to us. They're invoking their own treaty rights to stop it because they don't want it.
And also these waters, the water moves fast, the flow moves back and forth. We have storms, we have anchor strikes, we have all kinds of things. It's just an absolute miracle that it's held up this long, and it's a ticking time bomb, and it's absolutely appalling.
And it's such a pristine area, this pipeline, it just needs to be decommissioned and no tunnel. It needs to be removed. It should have been removed years ago, and it should have never been allowed.
And we know that pipelines spill and they leak. How can something like that, going through a body of water that many millions of people depend on in the largest freshwater region in the world, how can that be safe?
When Enbridge talks about safety, I can't believe them because their track record represents it, as well as I think their disregard for Indigenous communities, because if they really cared, if they really were concerned about the Great Lakes, about our water, or about our land, they wouldn't have ran the pipeline here in the first place.
They're just about profits. They want to get their oil from Canada to Canada. That is their main agenda.
You know, so part of the Michigan's economy is tourist economy, and that tourist economy relies on clean water and places to fish and places to hunt and places to camp, and relies on having natural beauty in places. It's the whole concept of needing the line in the first place that we have to work on getting rid of.
We have seen time and time again, even from Enbridge Energy themselves in their own documents and reports, that Line 5 will have a very minimal impact on gas prices here in the state of Michigan, a very minimal impact on propane prices in the Upper Peninsula, and it's used as a fear tactic, as a tool in order to drive further dependency on this single energy resource that Line 5 carries.
They're still just talking about what about this money? What about these jobs?
I don't believe that as a corporation that they are truthful, honest, and I don't think they have any interest about us at all except how to get around us.
And what's really offensive is that the fossil fuel industry then will create advertisements in media claiming that they are collaborating with their community.
There's a lot of propaganda and misinformation that goes around with Line 5.
So our whole fight is to try to make sure that people understand that. You know, that from an economic point of view, it doesn't make any sense to do it.
So no, I absolutely don't even entertain the thought of a tunnel. Back in 2010, when Pipeline 6B fractured in the Kalamazoo River, which is part of our original territory. It fractured actually not far from the Pine Creek Reservation.
Well, I think it was almost 17 hours or 19 hours before they finally shut it down.
When they got the alert that something was broken, they kept pushing it through harder because, oh yeah, pushing it through harder will fix it.
I mean, it almost completely shut down the river for 5 years for everything, all of its normal uses.
And they're still unraveling the consequences of that spill right now.
For years driving by that area, you could just smell it, and it's still there.
And that could happen here. That could be happening right here. It could be happening now. We not know about it because we won't find out about it for a while. They won't tell us.
And that's what scares me about the possibility of the same thing happening here with Line 5.
It's just an accident waiting to happen.
And a lot of people do think of the Line 6B spill, but what a lot of people fail to recognize is that over the lifetime of Line 5's existence, there has been enough oil spills, small, spread throughout, that they have spilled more oil along Line 5 than what happened in the Line 6B oil spill.
I think oil infrastructure is dangerous, and it's especially dangerous for Indigenous women.
A really major concern in Indian country is missing and murdered Indigenous women, and we can tie many of those stories and tragedies to the man camps.
The socioeconomic factors that happen when you're bringing outside workers, outside companies into rural areas, you're exposing them to more crime, more injustice or more trafficking that can occur within those industries.
And this is well documented, very well documented. And people live in fear.
When Enbridge was up in Line 3 near Minnesota, there was a report that was released shortly thereafter that human trafficking had taken place with the workers that they had brought in.
They did an investigation, the FBI did, and they caught them, right? Do we want that here in Michigan? I don't.
Bay Mills Indian community adopted a resolution of banishment against Enbridge Energy and as well as the dual pipelines. And so when that banishment resolution was enacted, we were acknowledging the continuous harm that Enbridge Energy and the Line 5 dual pipelines continue to play presently and continue to inflict against Bay Mills Indian community.
And so it's been extremely offensive to see Enbridge and other companies actually put out commercials and advertisements and stories saying that they engaged in cultural peacemaking with Anishinaabe people.
There are 12 federally recognized tribes in the state of Michigan, and every single federally recognized tribe has opposed the Line 5 dual pipelines as well as the Line 5 tunnel project.
Right now, the entire world is looking to big polluters like the United States to change their carbon footprint.
We need to end our addiction to oil and be more low impact.
We can look at alternative energy resources, we can look at alternative energy infrastructure, whether it be solar, water, wind, but no one's willing to make the investment because we're just so reliant on the single energy that exists or that we're used to.
They're not looking at a long-term vision of what this would be for us. And it will be so much easier to deal with any economic fallout of shutting the pipeline down than it will be to deal with the economic fallout of a major leak.
In my tradition, we plan for 7 generations. So the work I'm doing now, I probably won't be able to, I won't see the results because I'm thinking 7 generations ahead.
Every action that we take today, whether it be 1 second from now, 1 day from now, a week from now, must take into consideration those next 7 generations.
Our goal is 7 generations from now that our people will still catch fish and be able to eat them.
And that's one reason why this pipeline fight is so important to our people.
You don't want to be sorry that the worst happened. So we have a chance to avoid that.
We can't take it for granted. I mean, just things like Flint not too long ago and Kalamazoo 10 years ago. We don't need a repeat of either one of those in this state.
We have the resources, we have the money, we have the technology to solve all of the Line 5 problems. What we don't have are the people committed to solving those problems.
We're bringing legislators, we're bringing tribal citizens, we're bringing our tribal leadership.
And so I want allies who are in all the other social justice movements.
As a Native woman, I'm telling you, I'm asking you, I need your help. We don't have enough of us to change this, but I need help.
We can only do what we can do, but Line 5 is here. It's our responsibility. We have to make sure everybody knows about it, understands the issues, and we also have to try to keep that bigger picture in mind all the time. Every one of us is somebody's 7th generation.
If I can think of a future, whether it be 50 or 100 years from now, I want those children or those grandchildren to be in a future where they don't have to worry about those things anymore, where we're respecting water for what it is, as a life source of creation, and it's being treated as such.
So I would like it to know in 7 generations that they have what we have in abundance, and that it's safe, and that they're able to eat it, and it's not poisoned, and they can go skipping in the berry bushes or swimming in the lake and know that they're safe. That's what I hope for my grandkids' grandkids.